All right, good morning. This is the work session for the mayor and council for March 8th. And I will open up and get started here. The first thing on the agenda is an introduction of Dr. Rachel Lynn, who is the new library manager. Who's going to introduce her? Is that going to be? All right, Tracy, come on up. Where'd Sarah go? Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor and council, staff, guests. I'm honored this morning. The Parks and Recreation Department is proud to welcome Dr. Rachel Lynn to the city of Rica. I think she's already introduced herself to you this morning. Dr. Lynn is the new library manager for the Rica Public Library. With an extensive and impressive background working in the public library environment, I feel confident that the collective decision of hiring Dr. Lynn was the right one. And I am excited to see our library services continue to grow and reach our citizens through its overall mission of being a community hub. Dr. Lynn has served as a library assistant, an assistant library manager, and a library manager. Her education includes a BA in theater, master's in theater history and criticism, a PhD in interdisciplinary arts, and she is currently studying to obtain her Master of Library in Information Studies with a focus in digital stewardship. Please help me welcome Dr. Rachel Lynn to our staff.
Welcome. Are you also going to introduce Lisa Deming, the Senior Center Manager?
She was unable to attend this morning.
Okay, well, thank you.
We'll catch her on the next round, I guess.
That's fine.
She's
Welcome.
still working for the city of Carrollton right now, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dr. Lynn. All right, let's go ahead and move on to B, Community Development, Tracy Jarvis. Let's take up item VA-01-22, parcel number V0200700012, Highway 61-101 at Leggett Drive. This is a request for a variance from section 9.032C. There'll be a public hearing on this item. So, Ron, are you going to do this?
Yes.
Let me get you to briefly introduce this, and we'll see if we have any questions at this point.
Sure. Rockhaven Homes they have a townhouse development on Industrial Boulevard. As we know, there was a rezoning that was done back in May of last year, and they've now come back for variances to require the garage or allow for the garage doors to be oriented towards the front instead of the rear of the unit.
Okay, are there any questions from council? This item does have a public hearing, so we will take this up in the regular session. All right, if there are none. We'll move on to B2. This is an amendment to the text section of 2.02 of the City of Villa Rica zoning ordinance. Does this item require a public hearing?
It does, yes.
Okay, that needs to be noted here. All right, so let me get you to briefly introduce this one. We'll do the same thing.
And we have some changes to go to this, but need to talk to David Mecklin about it first.
Well, let's go ahead and introduce the item, Ron.
Sure. I'm sorry. It's okay. Thank you. This is an amendment to Section 2.02, which establishes the terms for the Planning Commission members. So right now, currently, the members have 3-year terms. This is a proposal to make it 2-year terms so it can better mesh with the council's council's election schedule.
Okay, I appreciate that. And as Mr. Carter noted, there are some changes and clarifications need to be made to that. So we'll get those to Mr. Mecklin or to you, Ron. We'll see if it's prepared for tonight's meeting.
Okay.
We'll carry this into the regular session tonight. All right, let's move on to B3. Fullerville Soccer Field Lighting Repair. Who's doing that? All right. Nick's held up? Okay.
Right.
So Tracy Jarvis, go ahead and come up and introduce this item, please.
Right, so this is to repair the the lights at the soccer field in Fullerville. They've contracted, or looking to contract with West Georgia Lighting and Design to get these lights retrofitted and working properly. We're already in the midst of soccer season, and we want to go ahead and go with this.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions for Tracy on this item? All right, if there are no questions, is there any objections to making this consent item number 1? All right, no objections. That'll be consent item number 1. Tracy, thank you. All right, let's move on to C, Human Resources. Sarah Andrews, the approval of the workers' compensation insurance for March 10th, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Good morning, Sarah. If you'll go ahead and introduce that item.
Good morning. That title was supposed to be corrected to say June 2022, sorry.
So this is March 10th, 2022 to June 30th, 2022?
Yes.
All right, go ahead and explain that.
So when I met with the broker and she explained our term usually goes from March 10th to March 10th, I said, well, that's odd. Can we change it? And she and I talked about finding a broker or a provider that would get us all the way to June of 2023. But unfortunately, the person who said that they would bid on it for that purpose did not. So our original vendor gave us 2 quotes. The first one being March 10th to March 10th. And I'd like to get away from that random term. I don't understand that. But they did give us a quote through June 30 of this year. So that means it's only 3 months and 20 days or so. So, and since I'm just interim for the HR position, and hopefully you'll be voting on our new HR director tonight, I thought it'd be good for us to do the short term now through June of this year, and then he can do a full 12-month term this summer. So if you look down, there's some detail there. So the way workers' comp works is they take the person's salary, and depending on what their job duties are, they assign that salary to a rate depending on the risk. So that box you see there doesn't have the titles of what those are for, but like in the middle, 8810, for instance, that's a clerical position, and you can see why that's so much lower than everything else, because there's less risk when you're sitting in an office all day than a police officer or somebody on the roads. So, but if you look at the current rate to the upcoming rate, you can see the rates have decreased. So, so overall, we are going to be paying less per rate. But again, this is just just under 4-month bid.
Okay. All right. So, but you would be seeing a new bid process take place pretty soon so that we would have
Yes.
something to vote on before this one would expire. All right,
Correct.
Council, do you have any questions for Sarah on this? All right. If there are no questions, is there any objections to making this consent number 2? All right. If there are no objections, then we'll move on to D.
Thank you.
Public Works. Thank you, Sarah. Number 1, EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Bobby, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is an annual process that we have to do to maintain our MS4 permit with the state of Georgia. We've been using CCR Environmental / VHB for the last 5 or 6 years. A couple of the partners of this ended up buying the firm out. It's the same group. $17,262 is budgeted, and it's under budget. It's very important to us and actually for the state too to keep the same consultant if we can, to keep the data in a like fashion, where it's easily, sampling points and all that stay the same. But with that, we recommend approval of this.
Okay, council, do you have any questions for Bobby on this long-term water quality monitoring? All right, if there are no questions, is there any objection to making this consent number 3? If there are no objections, we'll move on. Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, sir.
Let's go to E, Finance. Jennifer Hallman. Good to see you, Jennifer. Write-off
morning.
customer receivables.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is done on an annual basis for our water and sewer and sanitation. Based on the agenda item, you can see that we have a write-off or requesting approval for write-off of $47,715, which is 0.51% of our total revenue, which is still a good percentage based upon usually it's around a 1% or less that you want to is your target percentage. I did call around to the
Hang on just a second. He's laying on that horn. All right, go ahead.
Okay. City of Carrollton, they had an average of 0.31. Carroll County Water Authority had 0.43. We average around 0.46, and Douglas County Water and Sewer Authority averaged about 0.91. We do believe, even though this is higher,
It's okay. I think you can continue.
okay, higher than what it's been in the past 3 years, we do believe that this is primarily because of COVID. Families are struggling, paying their different bills. In saying that, July of last year, the federal funds, there are a lot of federal dollars go into different entities. Department of Community Affairs being one, Talatuna, which is a nonprofit on the Douglas side, and then Community in Action, which is a nonprofit on the Carroll side. They offer assistance. They receive federal funds, and they offer all kinds of assistance, with utilities being one. And since July of last year, the city has received $21,600 to assist customers with their utility bills. So while the money that we received since July doesn't help this number, we're hoping that it will, have an impact on when I bring this to you next year, since it's an annual request.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I know we look at this every year, and this is always going to be an issue. You're always going to have these write-offs, but, and I apologize that I didn't bring this up in our meeting, but I'm a little bit curious about, there are 5 accounts on here that make up 31% of this total amount. Can you talk a little bit about those 5 accounts?
Sure. Sarah, Ashley, and I, Ashley being the customer service manager, went over those top 5, and the reasons those were high is because they had a large, or they had a water leak, a large water leak, and they either didn't get it fixed, or they got it fixed and did not provide a receipt, and they were tenants, so they left.
All of them?
Yes, it's
Okay.
my understanding.
It's interesting that y'all had looked at the 5 when we certainly have not discussed that there were 5 of these, but they stood out to me. So I can understand that. Now, when we implemented cycle billing, it was to catch these kinds of delinquencies, but also when you have a leak, that can get out of hand really quickly, and sometimes you don't even know that's what's happened. So I guess I can understand that. We need to do you want to say something?
I will say, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I sat down with Jennifer yesterday, and we started going through this, and we started looking at those big numbers.
Okay.
As to what caused them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and
Well, let's
just
let
for
Sarah-
example, there was one that had 100,000 gallon bill in 1 month. So yes, the cycle billing is really helping, but if it's that fast,
Yeah, no.
it's too late. So
No, I understand that. I've had one myself. I know other people have that. You get the bill, you have no clue what's going on, and then you think, well, maybe there's an error at the meter, so then you sort of don't do anything for a couple of weeks, and you find out, no, it's still happening. No, I get that. All right, is there any questions for staff from council?
Yes,
Ms. McPherson?
because wasn't in with Danny when sat down, so he might have gotten some additional explanations that I didn't have. Back, how many years ago was it, Sarah, because you weren't here yet, Jennifer, that we made the change to the cycle billing, and we also started charging people more. And I remember being sensitive to that because while I don't move that often, I do know that it can be very costly to move into a new place because not just the cost of moving, but all the deposits you have to put on a variety of things. Everything from your garbage dumpster. And so I was reticent about, let's not make it, too cost prohibitive for people, and that the results need to matter. Now, this looks to me like we're doing worse, not better. And I know you mentioned COVID, but also, and people might have used more, people were also receiving checks. I mean, all of us received checks, including people that didn't even lose their job, right? Because the federal government was sending something out to everyone rather than targeted. The cycle billing, okay, instead of having everybody show up at one time, that's what we did initially for 2 reasons. We'd catch it earlier, if somebody was behind, so they wouldn't just get buried under the debt. And number two, it would change the workload for staff. Rather than it all be jam-packed into one time, it'd be spread out over the month. So, okay, so how often are bills coming in? How many times a month? What's the cycle work like?
There's 4 cycles, once a
Okay.
week.
Okay, once a week. And everybody needs to hear this because I might have asked about this before, but I don't recall the answer. I'm looking at city manager reports that are weekly. You know, right? They run about a week behind. Sometimes I'll get a week behind that. And I'll see several weeks in a row where there's 0 cutoffs, and then all the cutoffs will be in one place. And I'm like, shouldn't we be catching that sooner? Are we not doing it those weeks? Are we not out there checking? Because those bills are coming in. So, and if somebody's bill is enormously different from the time before, so tell me, why are we in, other than COVID, why are we doing worse at collecting money? I have some explanation on why some of them are enormous in thousands and they're skipping town with that. And I guess it's overwhelming. I don't know.
Like the mayor said, the 5 large accounts account for 30% of that balance. So when you take them out, you're down to the $35,000 mark that we were at last year. So yeah, unfortunately, with the 5 large bills, I was concerned also, but when I saw that some of them were 100,000 gallon leak in 1 month, I mean, even if we looked at it at 45 days, it's still, you've already used over 100,000 gallons. So unfortunately, I think there's always going to be these large ones. And we've talked before about if they're tenants, do we have any hold on the landlord? And I don't think the answer was yes. So then we're left with those balances. So I understand what you're saying. I will say our customer service manager does a really good job of getting these things collected. I mean, we're billing $7-8 million, and to write off 47, I know we'd rather it be 0, but I think we are doing a good job. So
So are you saying that those other weeks that are 0 cutoffs, we're out there, we're staying on top of that, but there's 0 cutoffs those weeks, and then I'll see a number of them on another week? Are you telling me that's nobody needed to be cut off? I mean, I don't want to cut off
needed to be
people's
cut
work.
off, yeah, but if she's short-staffed, or if they're working on a different project, or if she's, out that week, I mean, there might be various reasons, but we will look at it.
Okay, so in that case, we actually may be losing money we don't have to lose. That's what I want to find out. I want an answer on that. And, I mean, I don't want to cut off anybody's water, but I do know this. When we bought our house on 404, that guy sold that house, left a big bill to the city. The city worked with us. We got stuck with some of that, but I also was aware of it because I think they had driven across the sprinkler system while they were loading up and all. And we picked up on it mainly because it was really wet out there. And so that's my only other thing is, if you have this many gallons leaking somewhere, I'm just wondering if there's 0 sign of it, or they're walking through a lake to get to the car. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be it's all in the ground. You have no clue.
I agree, but if you have a tenant they're not a stakeholder in the property, so they may not care.
Well,
So-
let me shed some light on that as a landlord and somebody who's run into these at multiple properties. Often you see 0 evidence, 0, not even a little bit of water, not even moisture. You can't even figure out that there might be a leak. You're totally unaware. And that's exactly what happened at my own house. We had no evidence whatsoever that there was a leak there. So yes, they're not walking through water. Maybe those occasions occur, but I don't see it. I had some townhouses in Douglasville, same thing happened. That went on, those tenants were there for a while. We couldn't find a leak nowhere. So at some point you try everything you can, then you start cutting up the yard and finding where there might be a crack somewhere. And eventually you do find it. But people don't take the most aggressive step first. I think my point on the 5 accounts is exactly what you said, because if you were to take out that $15,000, which was those 5 accounts, then you would be down to about $32,000. And if you look at that, you're down below what all of the other authorities have in losses. So to me, I think we are doing better, notwithstanding the COVID and all that. I mean, I'm sure that played a role. But here, I don't think that we expect this to be much more than $30,000 on $7 or $8 million in billing. So I think they're doing a good job over there.
And that may be very true, and I appreciate that input because you do have those properties that you can weigh it against, and that's why it was a question for me, not a statement that I know that's what's occurring, just one example. But there's still something to do with, if it's that bad, why aren't we catching it, you know, on the billing, on the quarterly time? Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff on this? Ms. McCoy?
I just have one. Are these all residential or are they commercial too?
We usually take the commercial off. There were some commercial this time that I had removed a couple years, well, I guess last year maybe, to see if we could reach out to them and catch that, but they're gone also, so we didn't get those. So there are a few commercial on here, but usually it's just residential.
Okay, and are the ones that are that make up the 30%, or any of those commercial?
No, those
Okay.
are all residential.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Oh, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
This was Danny, so it probably got answered. What was the deal with the ones that were dated 15, 16, 19? What's the explanation for those?
So those were the commercial ones that Anna that she just asked about and I was referencing. So those were old real estate, old landlord accounts that I thought we still had relationships with. Like, let's collect those, but turns out they were already gone also. So they are not holding properties anymore in the city. So I'm asking y'all to write those off also. But those are not part of the
That's not part of those
30%,
5?
yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, anybody else? Mr. Carter?
When we run the monthly thing and the monthly bills, do we have it spit out the ones that are way out of bounds like this so that we can notify those residents that there's something going on?
Yeah, Ashley, and it's every week. When she runs the bills, she is, there's a series of reports she runs. So one of them is the high bill or high consumption. So she runs a report that shows anything over 100,000 gallons. Usually they're commercial or industrial, and they have a reason to be that high. But if she sees any residential on there, she pulls it. I think she also has a variance report that shows her, which is more relevant on a residential, because a jump from 5,000 gallons to 15,000 would be more significant in that situation. So yeah, there's a series of reports that she runs that flag these instances.
But do we notify those residents something's going on out of the ordinary?
Yeah, so she'll send a technician out there, and if the meter is spinning, when he looks at the meter box, then he'll turn it off, because if it appears that nobody's home and the meter's spinning, there could be a leak somewhere. And
Yeah.
then he'll put a hanger, a door hanger on the doorknob so that they can be alerted. But other instances, they are aware of it and they can't afford to get a fix yet. We try to talk to these people and have conversations about we try to work with them. I can't fix it yet. Can I pay it? Can I pay this much this month and hopefully I can get it fixed? So, we're trying to work with people.
Okay, any other questions? All right, is there any objection to making this consent number 4? All right,
None.
there are no objections. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
All right, let's go on to E2, authorize the eligible use and transfer of American Rescue Plan Act, which is the ARPA funds to assist with upgrading the North Plant. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yes. Hopefully this is the final step. As you know, we were awarded just under $6 million from the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We received just under $3 million in July of last year. We'll be receiving the other $3 million around July of this year. The Treasury issued the final rule January 6th of this year. And I've been attending webinars, whether it be through GMA, which I have one actually on Thursday, as well as from our auditors that are explaining the final rule, what that means, what our options are, what our eligible uses are. And long story short, that final rule allowed for government entities to have to claim a loss of revenue. And what that means is even if you didn't experience that amount of revenue, which $10 million is the max that you can use under that eligible use, you can still claim that way that it goes into the general fund, and you have met the requirement of an eligible use. But we, as the city of Villa Rica, even last year claimed that we were going to use the money for upgrading the north plant. This does not change that. All this is just a housekeeping accounting side of things where we're going to move the money to the general fund, claim the eligible use, then we're going to move that money back into the water and sewer fund and still do the upgrade or it's going to partially pay for the upgrade to the north plant. So this is just making it more official, or making it official and asking y'all's approval to do so.
Okay, are there any questions for Jennifer?
Nope.
Okay, if there are no questions, is there any objection to making this consent number 5?
None.
All right. Let's move on to E3, fiscal year 2022 budget amendments. These are numbers 146 through 168. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. The first set, 146 through 151, is just the budget amendment regarding the cemetery tree and limb removal that y'all approved last meeting. That's the budget amendment that goes along with that, accepting the donation and then also using some of fund balance to pay for the difference. The next set, 152 through 153, is the backflow software upgrade that we're getting. This is a rollover from last year, so that is just under $10,000. The next 154 through 155 budget amendment is to reallocate Douglas Sploss funds from Pine Mountain to Connors Road Park. When the Douglas Sploss was being programmed, for what we received from that, some funding of around $101,456 was initially placed in Pine Mountain. And so we're requesting that money be removed from Pine Mountain to go into Connors Park.
Okay.
The next budget amendment, 156 through 157, is 2015 Carroll Splost. There are some funds remaining for that, and we are just wanting to, again, program that into road projects, primarily road resurfacing or the Mirror Lake Connector. The next category, or the next section, 158 through 161, is just the budget amendment for the customer receivable write-offs. We had originally budgeted $35,500 for the write-offs. However, due to our write-offs being a little bit more, is just requiring a budget amendment, $11,586 for the water and sewer and $629 for sanitation. And then the last group, 162 through 168, is the previous item we just discussed and the budget amendment that goes along with the American Rescue Plan Act funding.
Okay, are there any questions for Jennifer on these budget amendments?
Yes.
All right, Ms. McPherson.
Just a clarification, and I don't know if you can speak to it or if it'll need to be Tom. The one thing that caught my attention had to do with the transfer of the funds from the Gold Museum, Stockmar Park, to Connors Park. Does that have something to do with the percentage when the SPLOST was passed for the Douglas County side? Basically, we had set up an agreement where certain percentages would go to particular things over there on the Douglas County side, whether it was Parks and Rec. Does that sound familiar to you? It's almost like it was distributed into different baskets, percentage-wise. We don't do that on the Carroll County side. This was under the previous city manager. And so just explain to me just quickly what caused that need to move it from one to the other, and are we doing something significant over there at Connors Park now that we may not be aware of, that like we're actually going to start developing that passive park?
So both of those fall under the percentage like you were referring to under recreation for the Douglas County SPLOST, the Pine Mountain and the Connors Road Park. So yes, the Douglas County SPLOST does have certain buckets based on a percentage of what we receive, but both of those fall into that. So the reason we chose to do this, and we discussed it during budget season, was a few years ago, we had budgeted for $700,000 for the Connors Road Park out in the future. But we started doing stuff at Pine Mountain, so in just, staff discussions, we moved some of that around, and then we realized, nope. And I think former council member Michael Young had asked, well, I thought we had promised $700,000 for Connors Road Park. So we were just trying to rectify that and put that back to Connors Road Park, so.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Are there any objections to making this consent number 6? All
None.
right, there are no objections. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, Tom, F1, approval of the special event permit, application and sale of alcohol.
Good morning.
Morning.
The West Georgia Cornhole held their first annual event, I think last April, if I'm remembering correctly, and have come back around for a special event permit for this year. They've moved their event up to March, and not just moved it up to March, but moved it up to Saturday. So that's why we put this on the agenda late. They need your permission for the sale of alcohol. And I also wanted to tell you about an issue that we're having with food, the way that we process food truck applications. We're not really set up to do that for somebody that's out of town, because we require some local inspection stuff to go on with, like, the fire marshal and the health department. It's very logistically, it's not impractical, it's just really annoying. So, like, if you're in North Atlanta or Cobb or someplace, you basically have to lose a day of business to come here ahead of time, so we're trying to work through that, but I do need you to approve this. They had 2 food trucks last year, and they both ran out of food about 6 or 7 o'clock, so they're trying to do 4 this time. So looks to me like it's going to be an even bigger event than what they did, which I think pretty much filled up their facility last year. So if you want to go by, it's this weekend. But I would like to see us go ahead and get this not just approved today, but on consent, so that I can tell the guy that they can go ahead and start ordering, because it's Tuesday morning, and they're trying to get ready for a Saturday event.
Okay. Are there any questions for Tom?
Yes,
All right, Ms. McPherson.
just real quick. So when did this go on the agenda?
I put it on late, maybe Thursday.
How did I miss it? I did my packet on Friday. I totally missed it. Okay. Was there attachment?
Just the application.
Okay. And just kudos to this business that's doing this. They bring in hundreds of people from all over the place for this big tournament and competition. I'm not a cornhole person. People would pay me not to be on their team. But if you go over there and observe this, I've got something going on that day, but I'm going to run over. And if you have any free time, go over and see what they're doing. It's very cool, the people that come in and the food and the competition. And, the technique these people use, they are serious about this game. So hopefully they'll have really good weather too.
All right, are there any other questions?
Yes, Mayor, I just want to confirm, so this is a alcohol, we don't need a public hearing on it, though?
Right.
Okay.
All right. Is there any objection to making this consent number
I
7?
think Shirley will have an objection, has alcohol involved.
Oh, that's true.
Did nobody ask you?
Is there any objection to making this consent number 7? All right, without objection, I'll make that consent number 7. All right, F2, final adoption of the Villa Rica Livable Centers Initiative Study. Chris, would you come?
Yes.
Lord, you're already there. All right, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Mayor, City Council, and this is the culmination of the Livable Centers Initiative process that begun last January, and this has wrapped up as of December. However, there were some final modifications that I request being made to the report with respect to having some pilot projects actually priced out, as opposed to just having something that had like $2 signs on it or $3 signs. So they've gone back and amended that, and our project manager from MKSK went on paternity leave, so was out for about a month, which also led to a delay. So this is the final product. We've already applied for funding with the Atlanta Regional Commission for our first project, and we're hopeful that that will be funded, but this is just one last step in the process, is to adopt the plan.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, council, does anybody have any questions for Chris? All right. If there are no questions, is there any objection to making this consent number 8?
None.
All right, that will be consent number 8. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah,
All
so there'll be zero presentation at all in the main meeting, then, right? And at this point, because we've had that, you feel like it's covered well with people as to what we're doing now. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. Okay, we have reached the end, except that they've added an extra page over here to remind me that I'll need to adjourn at some point. Let me read off the consent agenda as I have it, and if there are any changes or objections when I have finished, I'll take those up. Consent number 1 will be Fullerville Soccer Field lighting repair. Consent number 2, approval of workers' compensation insurance for March 10th, 2022 to June 30th, 2022. Consent number 3 will be EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Consent number 4, write-off customer receivables. Consent number 5, authorize the eligible use and transfer of American Rescue Plan Act, which are ARPA funds, to assist with upgrading the North Plant. Consent number 6 will be the fiscal year 2022 budget amendments, numbers 146 through 168. Consent number 7 will be the approval of special event permit application and sale of alcohol. Consent number 8 will be the final adoption of the Villa Rica Livable Centers Initiative. Does anybody hear anything different or have any objections? All right, Madam Clerk, that'll be the consent agenda. All right, we have reached the public comments portion of our meeting, and we'll ask you to keep your comments on a professional level, but the only person on here is the person I've seen before, so Ms. Mount, would you come up? We'll give you 3 minutes.
Jody Mount, 214 Rockmart Road here in Villa Rica, and I'm a little discombobulated. I haven't been able to sleep well in a while, and I wonder sometimes why I do this, why I care about this community. Ordinances are put in place to protect us all, and so we all kind of have an expectation of what can and can't be done, but they're useless if they're not enforced. Useless. And not only useless, they breed a contempt for all law and for the people who make them. My concern here is on the golf court, what we call the golf cart thing. It's really a PTV, personal transportation thing. And I had some concerns about Councilman McPherson's due diligence. One, when she spoke to Carrollton, and I don't know who she spoke to. I spoke with Officer Johnson. Carrollton has a low-speed vehicle ordinance, and they just parrot the state law. That's all they do. There's a 5 mile per hour difference in a low-speed vehicle. Their limit is 25 miles an hour. Our PTV, that limit is 20 miles per hour. That's big. Councilman Carter, your 35 mile per hour golf cart would not be legal in Carrollton nor in Villa Rica. We have an ordinance on the books here in Villa Rica where golf carts are required to be registered and have a decal, or the PTVs are required to be, inspected, have all this stuff registered and decals. We're not set up for that. We don't have it set up at all. So when we argue over, is it safe? Is it a good idea? Do people have enough personal responsibility not to drive on dangerous 35 mile per hour roads? It seems totally out of place to me. Just totally out of place. We're not even set up to do anything. All the attention on this is already put golf carts on the road. I have a friend who lives on Dogwood, and she says she's seeing golf carts out there. She's never seen them before, and she's seeing them out there now. So they're giving this false impression that it's legal now to just get in there, and it's not. It's not, and it's for a reason. If you go back and read our own PTV ordinance, I think you'll be surprised. Thank you.
Is there anybody else here who would like to speak in public comments? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment portion of our meeting here. I'll ask Mr. Mecklin, I got an email from you, you were stuck behind a train. Welcome. Do you have anything to add?
No, we do need to solve the train problem in this town, though.
All right, that's probably been going a little while, but I appreciate that. Mr. Barber, you have anything to add? No. Okay, all right, council, does anybody have anything to add before I adjourn? All right, Mr. Montahan.
On the liquor store ordinance, I know the city, the P and Z considered a amendment to the planning, to the zoning ordinance regarding design standards. But do we have an idea when the full ordinance will be ready for a review?
We expect that to be ready probably, Mr. Mecklen's doing some final touches on it, I'd say in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so April meeting at the
We
earliest.
think April
then.
meeting, is that, am I right?
You were right about that. I may have the draft of it ready before then, and the sooner we can put it out for public circulation, even prior to the meeting, I think it would be a good idea to begin receiving whatever comments people may have about it. So
I understand.
the moment I get it ready, I'm going to try and get it out into the public domain.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And our goal, though, is to take it up in April. All right, anything else?
Yeah, I had
Okay,
I
Ms.
had an
McPherson.
inquiry on that in the last 24 hours too.
Okay.
And so I referred them to staff because I did not know exactly where we were in the process, and we had nothing written in stone yet, so.
You know, we should have it ready very, very, very soon, and I think it's a good idea to get some public comment about it.
Okay, if there's nothing else,